Cool, welcome. Thanks for being here. My name is Etienne. And I'll take you a little bit through a small journey and connect it with social innovation, social entrepreneurship, what I'm working on, what we're doing, and how it's becoming a little bit of a global movement at the moment. So I'm originally from Berlin, but I've been living and working in Uganda in East Africa since many years. 2006 was the first time I went there. And instead of joining the German military service, I went and volunteered in an orphanage for 1 year. And that was the starting point for me to get connected with Uganda and see that the kids, when they started or when they finished primary school, they were not able to continue going to secondary school. And that was for me the starting point to create a sponsorship program where families would sponsor the kids to go to secondary school. And that kept me connected with Uganda, and I went back once in a while. And in 2013, when every year new kids would have joined, and by the time we had about 60 kids in the program, the first ones had finished high school and were not able to continue going to university, and were also not able to find jobs. And that was the starting point to sit together in an open space and discuss what can we do to solve this problem if young people are not creating jobs, because the educational system in Uganda is not fostering that, but it's just basically fostering obedience, people to follow orders. How can we foster a space where young people would create their own jobs? And that's what we set out to build. In a communal approach, we started buying land near the capital in Uganda, Kampala, and created a space that transforms young people from difficult and marginalized backgrounds, many of them from poor backgrounds, but also refugees and people who have gone through traumatic experiences, to become, in the end, social entrepreneurs, to create not just any kind of job, but jobs that are also fostering new solutions that are developed by the people themselves. And that became SINA, the Social Innovation Academy, where really we have been transforming challenges into opportunities, because many of our, how we call our beneficiaries, our scholars, transform their own difficult experiences into strength to start a social enterprise. And I'll give you a few examples of that. But how we do that is actually through a self-organized approach itself. So the people that come to us, the scholars, run the community themselves. Everything is self-organized, self-managed, in the way that the young people gain the skills and expertise they need to create their own businesses, their own social businesses, by actually running the community themselves. So how that looks like, for example, someone in the main community of 70 people that live there needs to be in charge of water. We're on top of a hill, and running water is not available, so we collect rainwater, and that always runs out in a dry season. So someone will have to fills that role of being in charge of water for the community. And then when the water runs out, the person will have to deal with 70 angry people who don't have water, and has to find new solutions, has to create budgets, come up with new ways, and find ways of how the water system can be solved in the future. So in the end, similar skills that are required when you start your own business. And everything is self-organized, from the logistics to the water to finance to accounting to the training itself. And in the end, while you're doing work, new ideas always come up that allow the people to test them out. And through boot camps, we try out what finds a market, what can create or find customers. And in the end, many ideas do not work out. And then the teams that have started to try the ideas will go back and learn more, take up more responsibilities until they, again, come up with something that has new potential and can work. Or something works out and it becomes a social enterprise that we then incubate and support until the point that it becomes financially self-sustainable. And the model has also been replicated by our beneficiaries, by our scholars, because it started with a group of refugees in 2016 who joined us, and after 9 months said, if the goal is for us to start a social enterprise, can we not maybe replicate the model of SINA into the refugee camp? And we said, of course, why not? That's a wonderful idea. And we realized in the refugee camp, actually, the model can even work better, because many young people there have such diverse backgrounds but cannot use many of the experiences they had prior, or many have limiting beliefs that I'm a refugee, I will not achieve anything anymore in my life anyway. So we help them to overcome that, to overcome limiting beliefs, to start setting new goals and steps how to get there. And that has worked so super well that as well in the refugee camps, through the self-organization, through the educational system that we call free responsibility, whereby freedom and responsibility are being combined, and people learn to become responsible and become more and more responsible until they create their own solutions. And it started to attract more young people from other refugee camps. And today we have 5 SINA communities in refugee camps, and 8 in total. The next logical step, also where do young people come from? For example, from Congo. Many refugees in Uganda come from Congo. So some of them went back to Congo to start a SINA community there, to be able to as well tackle some of the root causes that even lead to conflicts and problems that people have to flee in the first place. And right now we have other communities upcoming in more other African countries, and it starts to become more like a movement that is now self-organized as well on another level, that all the SINA communities that we have collectively steer the model, and best practices allow everyone to learn together what works best and how we can improve. And yeah, as well, I want to give you some examples of what comes out of these communities, because that's the biggest kind of, I would say, impact to see if young people are able to create their own solutions. And a few examples are one actually of a young girl that I met in 2006. Then she was like this tall. Today, so she went through the sponsorship program I started with, and then came to SINA after finishing high school. And herself, she suffered a lot from malaria as a child and almost died of it. And it's the #1 killer for children under 5 years in sub-Saharan Africa. And because she was affected by it herself, when she then started to unleash her potential, she realized, okay, what can I do to contribute to solving that challenge? And today she's a very successful, I would say, social entrepreneur who has in SINA founded Euganics, a mosquito repellent soap. So with the idea that social business can solve challenges in the world through a business approach. And soap is something that almost everyone in the world, even the poorest of the poor, use on a daily basis. So if it has ingredients that can repel mosquitoes, it allows especially children to be protected, whereby other measures are not affordable to the people. And so they're selling it primarily in the tourism industry, and the added revenue that comes in from the tourism industry, where, for example, hotels have rooms with soap every day, allows that extra revenue allows them to subsidize their sales into the villages, where people can buy the soap at an ordinary price like any other soap. And that then helps the people to protect themselves against malaria. Another example is a business called Upcycle Africa, whereby from the start of creating SINA, we have been building our learning spaces, free responsible communities, using plastic bottles that are compacted to make bricks, and the bricks are then used to construct houses. And that idea as well has not just created a business, but also a lot of mindset shift, that we do not need a lot of capital to start a business, a project, but what we need are resources. And many resources can be available everywhere if we look creatively, like waste. We can even be paid to collect waste and then use it to start a business and solve challenges. So that's where we have many more enterprises that came out from that idea of upcycling or recycling, who recycle plastic in refugee camps, who create fashion accessories from old sugar sacks, cement bags. There was even a rain jacket that they created from like rice sacks that made it into the exhibition of the United Nations in New York. And many more enterprises, about 60 now, that have started, that are still surviving until today, from 2014 onwards, in all different fields. And I think what we have created is starting to give hope as well to many others who can see that no matter where we come from, what we have gone through or not, we can be the change we want to see in the world. Actually, some of our scholars created a t-shirt, and many have that on their t-shirt, like, I am the change I want to see in the world. which I find really, really inspiring. And that's kind of the new drive, that the new young generation of people from difficult backgrounds, especially in Africa, are creating their own future, like one community at a time. And yeah, I think I don't want to just talk at you, but I also want to talk with you. So I think I'll stop at this point for now, and maybe rather want to make it a little bit more interactive, to see what resonates with you or what questions are there.
So curious, which regions in Uganda, whereabouts in Uganda are those projects?
Our main community is in a small town called Mpiji. That's about 1 hour outside of Kampala. The refugee camps, there's one called Nakivale, which is towards western side, more towards Congo, where primarily refugees from Congo are, also Burundi, some from Eritrea, Somalia. And then we have another one close to the border of South Sudan in the refugee camp for South Sudanese refugees. And another one kind of in the middle of the country, where there's a mixture of people from different countries as well.
There's some people that I work with in Kirian Dongo, which is southern, and they just might have some alignment with they focus on health in the refugees.
Oh, nice. Yep. So please do connect us.
And I guess my other thought in follow up to that is have you noticed like with the conflict and post-conflict sort of a huge refugee population, have you noticed qualitatively like issues in relation to trauma, healing, all of the challenges that come with living in a refugee camp, in conflict, for that matter, like ongoing conflict with refugee.
Yeah, Uganda actually has the largest population of refugees in sub-Saharan Africa, more than Germany in total numbers, and the country is smaller than Germany, so it has 1.6 million refugees. The policies are quite nice. Refugees are pretty much, I would say, welcomed, can work, can move, can set up businesses and so on. So the environment is quite friendly, I would say. And what was the part of the question there?
Like if like your work qualitatively has differed because of that sort of refugee trauma that people bring with them into the country, really?
Not so much, because we usually work with other marginalized groups as well. So we had Ugandans who used to be child soldiers, people who have gone through very traumatic experiences, who have lived on the streets and so on. So it's not much different than maybe of other experiences of refugees as well. So that's our target group anyway. And I think it works well, this self-organized approach there, because collectively they set their own future. It's not so much looking back into the past that was very negative, but supporting each other for a better future. And so we rarely had, although we really had some very difficult stories or backgrounds, we rarely had extreme cases where someone needed really much like psychological attention or something. Somehow there's a lot of healing in the community approach.
Yeah, my question was about funding after the SINA, and just wanted to hear more about that. So that's community-based effort, but I just wonder, do you get financial support from the US?
Yeah, we do. When it started, it was basically some of the sponsors that supported the children as well to help us. Some were like having a small business, for example, themselves, and then also supported the kids for already 6 years at that point and said, okay, if you want to start this new initiative, we can support you. And that was nice because it helped me to convince others. No one wanted to be the first to support this new idea. Let's create self-organized space where young people create their own jobs. But then I did find some other supporters. It's mostly been private individuals, family foundations, some foundations tied to businesses as well, or some that are thematically very much connected, like some of the bigger plastic bottle producers in Europe have supported us to build houses out of plastic bottles. Makes sense for them. Now we're also striving to become a social business ourselves, meaning like being able to cover our own core costs through our own revenue. We have like a whole village, you could say, where we accommodate guests, where people can hold workshops, seminars, can sleep. You can book it on booking.com, Airbnb. We also start to sell some products of some of our enterprises internationally. We have one, for example, as well, a grass that makes a perfect straw. So it's a very sustainable alternative to plastic straws. And it only grows in Uganda. And it was already known hundreds of years ago, but then people forgot about it when plastic came. And now some of our scholars have rediscovered it and now produce drinking straws from it. And that one we're also selling. For them, it's hard to access international markets, but through SINA, we're trying to bring that access higher and as well get a small commission out of it to cover our own costs.
So the follow-up question was, so I actually, it's just a confirmation if I got it right. So the enterprises are also helping funding the SINAs, the enterprises that are led by, for example, the examples that you gave before.
Not directly, most of them, because that's a business model we tried in the beginning, like many others, like acceleration or incubation centers in the world. Maybe the businesses give shares to the incubation space. That model doesn't work in Africa, not just for us, but for many others as well. So we want to rather try like a win-win situation for them to expand their market and for us as well, maybe to get a commission from selling the products. But it's just a few for now where this applies. Others, the goal is for us to help them to get started and become independent. And many do pay back through like mentoring others in this community that has formed, or a community of communities now. But there's no necessarily financial return that we expect. Also, many are social businesses, so they want to use the financial return they make to solve the problem and not pay back somewhere else.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much. I think that's very inspiring, the whole approach. Maybe could you tell us a little bit more about how the community-based approach is structured? Like, are there different roles, or are there mentors or facilitators? Like, is there some kind of a structure, or is it more like self-organizing from the ground up? And the second question would be, what would you say could other organizations, and especially in the social entrepreneurship scene, learn from your approach? Maybe also not just in Uganda, but maybe in Europe.
Yeah, so the self-organization, we developed something ourselves in the very beginning, based on some different concepts from around the world. Then at some point, 2 years later, we came across holacracy. Maybe some have heard about it. A self-organized or management system that distributes authority and has a clear structure. So people take up roles, and roles form like circles or teams, and they hold each other accountable, and a system can change or improve the roles all the time. So we adopted that. But then also realized, since we're living in a community, or our communities are not just workplaces, but they're also where people live. There's components that maybe in traditional workplaces you don't really have so much because people don't stay there. There's a whole community, or there's also personal well-being. So we started to iterate or innovate that further, and also work together with a few, I would say, leading people on that kind of aspect to make it more holistic, not just structuring the work, but also the community well-being and the personal well-being. And that's what has really worked well for us now, because people can distinguish a little bit themselves. Is it something that I'm doing out of my role, or is it something that maybe I do out of a person? And sometimes they connect, right? So maybe in a community, what happens naturally when they're young people living together, couples form, that brings jealousy and so on. So maybe in the work, between roles, there's no problem, but between humans, maybe there's a problem. And that problem will then affect the work. So if you don't have an approach that tackles all of that, it becomes difficult. And that's what we have tried and has worked for now, to set up a system that incorporates all these different elements. To the second question, what others can learn from that, there's so many different aspects of it. From the way of organizing, which also on the African continent is really unique. Like power hierarchies are some of the strongest in the world, where also the Ugandan president has been in office for 36 years and is not thinking of giving up. And also some of our scholars have experienced kind of the worst outcomes out of struggle over power and money from, for example, South Sudan, after they became independent and then everyone was fighting for power and money, what that means and what conflicts can come out. And some of them even said, I wish there would be a government that would run on a self-organized approach. And maybe one day it could be possible. So there's a lot to learn on that, but also the whole element of social entrepreneurship, how young people can create their own solutions and get started.
Thank you.
Thanks. I want to pick up on this and ask, actually I also have two questions. And the first question would be, do you think it's possible to kind of get rid of those power structures or get a different mindset into the community, that actually they have like a more like collective based decision-making processes and stuff? And the second question would be, do you have experience as well, or have you experienced as well, that communities were then kind of independently as a holistic community, like independent from outside influences, independent from outside relationships, or do they still need kind of like the connection towards outside systems to fuel on things?
Mm-hmm. We have had some of our communities became, well, first they were started, became independent, like legally and so on, so they're their own entity. It's not that we set up anywhere branches and say this is the right solution, this is what you need to do, but it's people that came from the community, went through the SINA system and then set up their own community. And 3 of the communities, after about 2 to 3 years, became, I would say, financially independent, which is a big step. First, we started to support them to get started, to set up the space, to build the houses out of plastic bottles and get everything going. But then what happened, 2 of them, for example, in a refugee camp. So there's a lot of, everyone, the big 8 organizations are always talking about like self-reliance. We want refugees to be in charge of themselves, but what they do, they implement programs from above and nothing really or little triggers down to create impact. So our community started to prove themselves like we can do it, because there's a lot of formality included as well. You need to have capacity to deal with bigger sums of money, to do the reporting and to the accounting and so on, which most refugees are not able to do. But the SINAs proved themselves we can do it. And then also COVID fueled that a lot, that one day to the other, many international aid workers were all pulled out. Almost no one was left in refugee camps, but projects still had to continue. So all of a sudden they looked for who can implement them and said, okay, these guys have been doing something already, let's support them. And so our communities got bigger deals to implement solar street lights, to build a basketball court. They built a whole amphitheater and have created like their own ideas how they can transform the refugee camp, not just economically, but also like the UN gives them food donations, gives them the basic needs, but it's not taking care of more than food and shelter. But people want to live, they want to do something. So the amphitheater is having open mics every Saturday and people start selling their products there, and it's really creating a culture that people have something that is worth living and not just surviving, right? So that has all happened because giving people the chance to self-organize and create their own solutions. And then many others start to support that from the outside. So they haven't been, I would say, completely independent without support from the outside, but in the sense that they're not dependent on donations or something. They can say no and yes to whatever they feel like can work for them. Yeah.
Cool.
Now I forgot the first question again.
The first question was about power systems, and if you have seen that you could like break this power systems and structures.
Yeah, I think there's an interesting development in the mindset of the people. Because again, the educational system in Uganda, and I did my master thesis about it as well, I would say is one of the worst in the sense of giving people the freedom to learn how to live life, but is one of the best to follow orders and be obedient. And that manifests as well, like in our application process. We have also open online applications. Most scholars come from referrals from members or from partner organizations, but anyone can also apply. And for some years in the application process, we asked people, what are your biggest or most important values in life? And maybe you can guess. What was number one? Obedience. Which was kind of shocking to me, but that's the reality for young people. They have been conditioned in that way to just follow orders. So in that system, our first 3 months, and I think that's the most powerful time in the SINA community, we call it the confusion stage, because it is quite confusing. People come from this hierarchical background, not just in workplaces or school, but also in churches and families and everywhere. And all of a sudden there's a different system where it is confusing. So there's a lot of unlearning, overcoming limiting beliefs that happens in the first 3 months, but also learning tools of nonviolent communication, how to set goals and other things that there's almost a transformation that happens. We see it almost a little bit like a caterpillar that comes to us, doesn't know that one day that he can fly, or she, but then the transformation happens and the person starts to fly off and see the reason, maybe the purpose in life, even despite maybe different or difficult challenges. And there then, if you have a system that distributes authority, it works really well that they can transition into that, take up the roles that are interesting to them as well, build almost their own curriculum based on the roles that are taken up. And that way more of, this distributed authority becomes natural, contrary to where they've come from, where it's different. Well, thanks a lot. We can talk more, I hope, and otherwise have a great rest of the day.